Wow, thank you so much for coming down. Everyone's turning up early on day one of Comic-Con. We really appreciate it. I'm really thrilled to be hosting and moderating your Blade Runner VR panel today. I know there's a lot of Han Solo fans out there, but hopefully there's a lot of Decad fans out there as well. For those who don't know me, my name is Jennie Kong. I'm the director and creator of an upcoming docuseries called The Game Maker Inside Story. It's premiering on Cinedigm's digital network this summer, and if you're interested in the art of storytelling and the behind the scenes of what goes on into making a game great, please check it out. I know it's dark, but just a show of hands, who did get to see Blade Runner 2049 last year? All right, okay. A lot of Officer K fans out there, okay. So we can go slightly spoiler heavy on it by the sounds of things, yeah? All right, okay. So please give a very big and warm welcome to our panelists today. Let me introduce you to them on stage. We have the Revelations creative director, Eric Gewirtz. VO stars and also the voiceover producer Tyler Moore and Valerie Arem. Welcome, guys. And last but not least, our titans behind the scenes, George Collins from Alcon and also Jonathan Krusell from Google as well. So we had a chance to take a look at the VR trailer just now. Could you guys maybe share a little bit more about your role in the project and also who your favorite Blade Runner character is?
Before we get started, I have to do a quick shout out. I've been coming to Comic-Con. I'm a San Diego native, and I've been coming to Comic-Con since I was like 13. My mom would like drop me off. Yeah. So this is a little bit of a dream come true for me, so I wanted to thank you all for coming and helping to celebrate this game, because it's pretty awesome to be here.
So as creative director, what did you do on the game?
So I helped with maintain the creative vision for the game, working on the storytelling aspect and the gameplay mechanics, and then working with the engineering and the artists and the publishers on making sure that we had a cohesive game that not only was a fun experience to play as a standalone game, but also was true to the universe and represented what a Blade Runner experience really was like.
Right, and do you have a favorite character?
In the game?
In the universe.
In the universe. I'm a really big fan of the dolls that Sebastian made.
I gotcha.
I play Detective Harper, who is kind of the faceless voice that you heard there. That's the character that you get to control and make the decisions for. And my favorite character, I would have to say, is Detective Harper. That's just me, though.
Good morning, I'm Valerie. I play Holly, and she is the AI who bosses Harper around. Helps Harper get around.
A little bit of both.
Through the game. So I'm the person who basically, as the player, gives you the directions of where to go and what to do. And definitely Holly is my favorite character. Although I like Harper, too. He's a cute.
I like Holly as well.
I'm George Collins, and I do the interactive projects for Alcon, which includes Blade Runner and The Expanse and some other things. I think my favorite Blade Runner character is actually from 2049. I like Love, because she's like a crazy killer who cries. I don't know, just kind of sexy. I like her a lot.
I'm Jonathan Krusell. I'm a producer at Google. I help make AR and VR apps for our platforms, work with amazing teams like Seismic. My favorite character, I probably would have said BR Sebastian. He's the closest to a game maker, but I'll go with Deckard. Just an amazing character, like iconic.
Great. So, I remember being young. I was growing up.
Hey, being young.
Well, about it. When I was young, I was growing up in England. My eldest brother brought home a rental copy of Blade Runner. I was so young, I didn't really understand fully what was going on in the film. But I remember it was a very visceral experience. It was very dark, very moody, unlike anything I'd seen before. So I love to kind of get a taste of, what was your first Blade Runner experience and first impression? And why do you think the franchise has impacted, fans so much and even film and game creators? Why has it made such a lasting impression?
I think it was one of the first films that I saw that really transcended beyond like not just being a science fiction film, but really being like a quality film that just had science fiction elements. And I remember just at an early age that really stayed with me, that like you could take out the science fiction components from this film and it would still be an amazing film. And I think that's part of what inspired a lot of people. And I think that the 2049 really just added on that and really embraced that idea of let's make an amazing film that just happens to exist and build off of the Blade Runner franchise. And that's why I think both films were like pretty instrumental.
Yeah, I remember seeing it for the first time with my folks, but like on a VHS, and I had no clue what was happening. But my first real connection with it was in college. I took a class where the only two things on the syllabus were 2001: A Space Odyssey and Blade Runner.
It's a good class.
That was a class. So stay in school. And I mean, the themes resonated with me, but also with what Giz was saying. I mean, it's such, the whole thing is a great piece of art. I mean, from the art direction and the soundtrack. I mean, I bought the Vangelis soundtrack and listened to it going to bed for probably 3 or 4 months nonstop, and it's such a great, like, palette of thought-provoking images and sound and characters. So that's why it resonates with me.
I think the first time I saw the film, what really resonated with me was that growing up and when I was a teenager, I was a big-time national tap champion. I was a tap dancer and a big band singer. And I had a very 40s sort of aesthetic to me. And I really didn't feel that I fit in anywhere. That wasn't a very common thing. And then I saw this film, and it was such a beautiful blend of, it had sort of this 40s aesthetic that wasn't really, because it was kind of an 80s aesthetic, but it was also sort of a sci-fi aesthetic. And I really was like, oh, they do exist. I fit in somewhere, right? That was sort of a blend of all the things that I was.
I felt like Daryl Hannah was like the bomb, basically. I really loved her character.
And Sean Young, I mean, like, just the whole, everything about it, just visually for me, the aesthetic of it was just so unusual. And it made me feel that being a person who was so unusual myself, that there were other people out there who would get me. Right? Because this film was so beautifully put together. I'm like, someone gets it.
It's very
someone
unique.
Gets this. Yeah. So I think for me, that's what sort of set it. And then again, the soundtrack, everything was really beautiful. And then when I met my husband, it was one of his favorite films as well. So that was, great because it's
awesome.
Something that, and it's timeless. It's just you watch it again and again and again, and it ages so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like, I probably saw it on television as a kid. I don't even remember the first time, but being kind of a nerd, I remember all the different director's cuts and trying to think about, like, wait, what did they change and why did they do that and what does this mean now? And trying to piece that together. But when I think about why it's endured, I think the reason is it's not like an idea of a dystopia or a utopia. It's like different ideas of dystopia, like an environmental dystopia, a dystopia of a loss of self, and then different ideas of utopia, like going off-world, flying cars, all mashed together. So there's all these ideas in it that resonate, that it's not like any other science fiction in that way, and that, like, Mad Max or something, it's like one kind of world. Blade Runner is like many different kinds of worlds all at the same time, which is why I think it feels a lot of times like the modern world.
I remember getting into Blade Runner in high school during the Laserdisc era. This is what we used to call physical media for anybody younger. So, and I remember pulling out the disc and flipping it and watching the second half. And so this was when, like home theaters were getting more accessible. And so one of my friends had this awesome setup and we would pour over this film. And what made it possible to go so deep with it was the level of immersion, that it's just this fully realized universe that every corner tells a story, right? And I think that's part of Ridley's work and part of what made this an amazing VR experience was that immersive universe.
I had the chance to see 2049. I think it was at the Grauman's Theater in Hollywood, and it was just insane. I think it was such a natural and beautiful continuation of not only the characters but the narrative and the world, to see it kind of stretch out into Vegas and other areas. So George, I want to ask you on behalf of Alcon, like, what you felt was the process of kind of diving back into this franchise, and what were the kind of key ingredients that really made this film pop, given that there's so many reboots and sequels right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that made 2049 really special, and I mean, it won the Saturn Award for Best Science Fiction Film of last year, and we're really super proud of that, is that, for us, it wasn't like some sequels I think are like, oh, Baywatch, we've got it on a shelf somewhere or whatever, let's just make it, what the hell. It was a really conscious effort for us over years to get the ingredients together, to get Ridley, to get Hampton Fancher, to get new people like Denis involved in it, the right people to make a Blade Runner movie. And it was this incredible labor of love for our company over years and years to pull it together. And I think that the love and the reverence that we had for it really came through in 2049. It really we really cared about it. And I think that's what made it like it's lived up to the original. It's the best way I can say.
So we saw the trailer, and obviously, Revelations is still set in LA, 2023. It takes place after the original film, leading into 2049. What was the genesis of the project? Because it seems like, there was a lot of decisions to be made as to where the story could fit in the timeline, as well as kind of, what kind of story you could tell around the Nexus resistance group. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how it got started.
So the original project, actually, we had a relationship, Seismic Games had a relationship with Google, and we were talking about doing something in VR, and separately, Alcon had been talking to Google about doing a Blade Runner game. And so it was actually Google and Jonathan and Jamil over at Google who said, oh wait, we have this studio that's really passionate about VR, and we have this IP that's kind of awesome for VR. And we put us all together, and they asked us whether or not we wanted to do a Blade Runner VR game. And we're like, yeah, please, please, we would love that. So we started working from there. That's how the initial project began. And then it became a matter of deciding where and what story to tell.
Right.
And this was before 2049 had come out, so we had to stay a little bit away from some of the content in 2049, and we didn't want to just stick straight with the original. So the decision was made to kind of place somewhere in between and kind of connect the two films, which was really cool from a game development standpoint and story standpoint for us, because we were able to take the themes and elements from both films and get some early access to 2049 and see kind of where the world of Blade Runner would transition going through those 30 years and how it would kind of transition. And so we were able to take some of the tech and some of the elements and some of the architecture and kind of blend that. That was really cool.
And it still explores the themes of identity and AI, right? And it was very surprising how of a natural fit it was between the two films.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the fun things was, because it's VR, there's zero barriers to entry on who you are. I mean, you're looking around and you're your own character. So initially, we had thought it would be really cool if you actually didn't have a gender and didn't have any sense of personal identity, because that's very themed in Blade Runner, and you were just you, and we weren't going to address you by name and everything like that. And that became very, very complicated and very hard to do to tell a story really quick. So we kind of had to switch tactics.
Right.
If I could tell another story of something we changed, something we really wanted to do was voice commands early on, which would have been amazing for like embodying the character, but like the technology wasn't there yet. But that was an amazing idea that I think will come again. Like, it'll have its time.
I feel like it's come by, though, a million, because I remember trying to do PC games 10 years ago. The voice commands just keeps coming, but...
Almost there.
Almost there.
Yeah, so when we started making the game without the character as a main voice, things got really awkward really quickly because you would have these conversations with people and you'd walk up and you would select what you wanted to say, and then they'd say, the character you're talking to would be like, no, you're crazy, why would I do that? And then they would just sit there and then you would select what you'd wanted to say, and then they'd be like, oh, okay, then I think I'm okay with that. And it was just felt like a really weird one-sided conversation, so we really quickly decided we needed to add a voice to the main character, and that was clearly going to be Tyler Moore.
Huh. Well, you know, and also talking about blending the two worlds, I think you guys did a really great job with Detective Harper, too, because he's a perfect character that goes right down the middle of, he's got elements of Deckard and he has elements of Kay, and he shares this kind of ambiguity of if he's a Blade Runner or pardon me, if he's a human being or a replicant. And then he also shares this kind of existential journey with Kay, where Kay knows he's a replicant, but also is trying to figure out who he is and decide who he is. And that's kind of the same journey you take as Harper, is even though you don't know you're a replicant or a human being.
No spoilers.
What's that?
No spoilers.
Oh, yes. But you're forced with these moral dilemmas and ethical choices that you have to make, that Deckard had to make with either killing or saving Rachel. And so no spoilers, but you do get to experience making those decisions and deciding for yourself kind of who you are and how you fit into Blade Runner Revelations.
So people are going to have an existential crisis when they try this.
Yes, you probably will have an existential crisis. Just be warned. So,
It's a disclaimer at the beginning of the game.
disclaimer, totally. So, call your mothers.
So Giz, as the creative director of Revelations, you know, you have this vast canon and story that you can delve into. How do you go about picking and choosing what would actually be very satisfying for like a diehard Blade Runner fan? How do you go about that?
Oh, that was actually pretty easy. The whole team, we just sat down and we said, okay, we're all crazy fans. Let's just make the list of every single thing we want to do that we ever wanted to experience in Blade Runner. And then we just built the game and the story around that. We literally just reverse engineered it. We're like, okay, well, I definitely want to fly in a spinner around LA. I definitely want to shoot Deckard's gun. I definitely want, and it's VR, so I want to hold Deckard's gun. We definitely want to explore Chinatown. We definitely want to, so we just kind of went through that whole list of classic moments, and then also working with Alcon on what are going to be the signature moments in 2049, and these moments in 2049 that we'd want to experience where the world evolves.
Right. And
then we kind of built everything around that. So we were definitely made this game for us as fans.
Got it.
And to add on that, as a super fan too, and during the process of recording, got to see some of the game as it was designed, and it was gorgeous. The first thing that I got to do was sit in the spinner, and that's just a nerd moment right there, where you're like, yeah! But looking around and seeing the world take shape around you, and even just raindrops sliding down the visor of the spinner as you're flying.
And that's an opening moment, right?
Yeah. And it really gets you in there. And then you land in Chinatown, and there's the architecture from the original Blade Runner, and you're just really immersed in, as a fan, you get into it very, very quickly.
Well, I will go into spoiler territory. We get to encounter Detective Gaff in Revelations. What was your decision around including him, maybe compared to some other characters from the franchise?
Yeah, well, like we said, we wanted to connect the two worlds, so that was important that we had some characters. There were characters, obviously, that were in 2049 that we couldn't touch and hit on, but we wanted to apply those, and Gaff was kind of this link between the two that was great. We didn't end up working with Edward James Olmos on it, but we worked with Edward James Almost, as we affectionately get him. So that worked out well. But yeah, I think he was a character that really kind of connected.
What was he like?
The character?
Yeah.
So the way we interpreted Gaff was we actually had a lot of fun writing some city speak and trying to figure out how actually that worked. But Gaff was, is kind of the strong man in the police department.
Yeah.
He's always on the straight and narrow, and he's kind of that moral guide
Right.
through there. So he gets to play off of Harper in a way where, as the player chooses in Harper, because this is a VR game, you get to choose kind of how you want to play your character, and Gaff responds accordingly. So he either mistrusts you more if you start to side more with the replicants and on the replicant side, or he's more on your corner if you're siding with the Blade Runners and the humans. So he plays off the character and the character interactions a lot.
And George, was there anything that was like off limits?
Well, I think at the time, obviously, we didn't want to have anything that would be a spoiler for 2049, and we knew Gaff was a good character because he's obviously in both films. I don't think that's a spoiler at this point. And he's not just a sidekick, he's also always a bit morally ambiguous. You don't know what side he's on. He's kind of a tricky character, and that's really natural for VR, where you're inventing your own character and you don't know for sure how people are going to react to you. And like that ambiguity works really well, I think, for a game.
Right. One of my favorite scenes in the experience is the Voight camp interrogations.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you pulled it from the film or whether you had some crazy writer's room experience, but how did you guys come up with those questions? And what were the questions?
Oh, we had a ton of questions. Yeah, we actually put it out to the whole team, and we said, okay, write the craziest psychological questions that you can ask, and so we studied the hell out of the Voight-Kampf and how it kind of evolved in 2049 as well. And the idea was, essentially, it's like, this is an empathy test to see if you're gonna get a reaction out of someone and to get this response. So we put it out to the whole team, okay, write the craziest possible questions you can, and we're gonna ask the player that, and then just kind of see what happens. And then we had to take out half of them because they were just like absurd. But the other half that we kept in ended up being these really kind of fun reactions. And so when you get to take the test as a player, you're getting these questions asked to you, and you get your actual reaction. And because you're in VR, we got to really play with the components of VR that make people physically uncomfortable. So I got to put the Voight-Kampf machine like right in your eye and shine that light right in there, and have the breathing part, kind of like the accordion breathing part, like kind of breathing and shaking in front of you. So it really, the first time people started experiencing it, they were like, I really felt uncomfortable as I was asking these questions, and there was like a visceral emotional response, and we were like, great, that's exactly what we're going for.
I'm on my own in the VR headset, but it feels like other people are hearing my choices, of what I was answering,
Yeah, it's definitely uncomfortable.
So Revelations is obviously, showcased in VR. I know obviously Google and Lenovo had a very crucial role in bringing it to life. I just wanted to find out a little bit more, Jonathan, about why this project was important to Google, and maybe explain some of the groundbreaking technology that you guys had brought to life.
Sure, so like right from the start, it was an amazing fit for VR. The number one thing that folks want to do in virtual reality is explore, whether that's a country on the other side of the world or a fantasy location. And so the idea of exploring the universe of Blade Runner is, that's a fulfillment of a fantasy, right? I can go through Chinatown, and what this new generation of technology allows is for you to lean in without any sort of tether at all, right? So if you're in Chinatown and you want to look behind the bar to see if there's a clue, you're actually able to move your head, lean in, and investigate further. So that delivers on this promise of exploration at like a human scale. And then at a more object scale is the idea of finding clues. You're going through the headquarters, you pull out something you find in Chinatown, you're able to move it in front of your face, turn it over, look closer to see if you can find that missing piece of information that's gonna crack the case, right? And I really think that mysteries are a great fit for virtual reality because it is this active storytelling by nature. Even if you're watching Law & Order with your significant other on the couch, you're both kind of having your own experience, how you interpret the clues. And that's in a linear narrative, right? So in something that's nonlinear like this game, you're able to find clues in your own order, and that makes your experience more personal and makes it more your own.
Yeah, what's interesting about that one, because I don't know how many people have had the chance to check out a VR game or experience recently, but so this headset's untethered, right? Meaning you're not plugging it into a computer. I can roam around. When I was playing, I hit one wall in the living room, and I could U-turn. No one saw me, I U-turn. So it is really immersive. Is that the kind of trajectory of what Google is looking at, just to, true immersion in VR?
Yeah, absolutely. When I heard about the technology, I was skeptical because this is really hard to pull off, right? There's basically 2 cameras here that can track locations and figure out the space around you. That's extremely hard to do on a small scale without any sort of markers outside. But the first time I tried it, it was just amazing. I could walk through my entire office, return back, and it would return me to the origin point accurately. And that's without any other sort of tether on it or any sort of markers outside. So yes, you're seeing more of this convergence of technology where things are getting smaller, they're getting more independent, and you're able to put more functionality on a device,
Right.
and then deliver it at like a price point that folks can bring to their home.
And then you have the additional control with the remote as well. And
Yeah, the controller gives you, your hand in the universe, so you can reach out, pick something up, turn it over,
Right.
put it in your inventory, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Revelations is actually a very robust experience, so it's not just like a 15-minute thing you can check out. I think I was in the world for like 2-3 hours overall, and the story for me was it's very ambitious, man. It's like 7 or 8 areas in the spinner, flying to each new location, and now I start the investigation. How much time and effort was going into all the art production, the soundscape, to create that kind of 360 feeling? Because, it's Blade Runner. You got to make it as kind of authentic as possible.
Yeah, and it's also, and on top of that, it's VR. So
Right.
we don't know where the player is necessarily within the same the soundscape, and we have to make sure everything feels completely immersive, not only from an art point of view, but from a sound point of view. A lot of work. I mean, an amazing team that put in a crazy amount of effort
Right.
working at this playing it over and over and over again, and really kind of refining the experience. There's also some as game makers, we're a little bit going into unknown territory with VR as well, because there's a lot of things in storytelling in games that work, that we take advantage of, that we can't do in VR, like knowing where the camera is, or knowing where the
Right.
player position is, or where the player is looking. So we can't have conversations and the player's off looking around and the person's talking to them. But there's other things we can do in the story that we can't do in normal games that we can do in VR, like invade people's personal space, or we actually know where their eyes are, so we can make eye contact between characters and the players. So those kind of things, really, we wanted to focus on, making sure that this was not only a game experience that was true to Blade Runner, but also a really true immersive VR experience. So we built a lot of mechanics and a lot of environments that really kind of, played on the 3D aspects of it as well.
Right.
One of my favorite parts is you're in Chinatown and you're speaking to somebody, and then you hear footsteps behind you, and a character that you saw earlier, you turn around and they're closing in on you. And then you turn around and you continue to talk to the woman that you're there to meet, and then he confronts you. You turn around and he's right there in your face. It's just really cool to hear the footsteps gaining and you go, what's that? And then turn around and now it's right in your face.
Yeah, and everyone experiences it slightly differently, because if you just don't turn around, he's going to react differently
Yeah.
than if you actually turn around early. So,
You know what I think is amazing is there's an Esper device where you can recreate, and this actually goes back to, I think it was Hampton Fancher had this idea that there was going to be some kind of device that would recreate a scene or a conversation from the sound waves on the wall. This was this weird trippy idea he had, and you guys had created this thing where you could recreate scenes from the past, and you can see a scene play out, but you see it from different points of view and different times, and it's not like any other experience you have with a video game where something's presented. No, you can go behind it, you can stand around it, you can see it from all these different points of view, and that's it's an amazing application of VR in my opinion.
Yeah, it was a little bit, we were talking about a little bit of the inspiration between the extension of what the Esper from the device from the original Blade Runner, where he's enhancing the photograph, what that would be like once they started having hologram technology in the Blade Runner universe, and also a little bit of a Minority Report vibe too, with like this idea of like you can fast forward and rewind these images in 3D. So big Philip K. Dick props.
Yeah.
The Esper is basically finding kind of reenactments and kind of clues along the way.
Yeah, so the idea is part of the mystery is you're going to these crime scenes and then you're able to gather enough data to recreate a holographic version of what happened. And then as you're playing through, you can scrub through it and you can play it from any perspective and from these fixed perspectives and find out you're gathering more clues to what happened based on these events.
Right. Was it a lot of source material to kind of work from in terms of the art production and creation? Was there anything that you guys wanted to include in but had to scale back because of time?
I mean, yeah, I think we would have, I think there were a bunch of 2049 environments that we would have loved to explore that we either didn't have time or they were really ambitious. You know,
Right.
the Sepulveda seawall was like awesome, but that involved water, and that's really hard to do. Some of the trash mesa and some of the places that they go in 2049, we were like really excited about, but we didn't have the opportunity to really fully do those environments justice.
Right.
So we had to save them for something else.
I would
And
have
even, yeah, I was thinking back, like, even when you guys were finalizing the locations, like, those were storyboarded, but a lot of them, the effects hadn't even really been all the way done at that point. So we were not even sure, you know, some of those, I mean, those look beautiful in the final film, but we didn't know all the way what it was going to look like when you guys were finalizing things.
You guys should do a sequel.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, we're down.
Yeah, I would have loved to experience the Vegas
Right.
scene. That would be pretty cool. So you mentioned before, obviously, you know, virtual reality is very first person. You see everything through the POV. And you mentioned that there wasn't a Detective Harper originally. So was the choice really to help guide the player through the narrative? What was the kind of final decision as to why that was needed?
Yeah, I think it was two parts. It was one was, again, the conversation and the mystery just felt strange with a silent narrator,
Protagonist, right,
protagonist.
yeah.
And then the second half was, obviously there was no personality when you're just reading text, and so we wanted to add a flavor for that and kind of fill that out. We didn't want to go so far as to add actual narration in the film because Blade Runner and narration has a little bit of a sensitivity around it.
I don't know what you're talking about there.
So we said we weren't going to go that far, but when we started talking about actually giving your main player a voice and started looking around, that's when we reached out to Tyler.
I think that was a fantastic decision.
You have a job.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really fun. It was an interesting experience too, kind of from an acting standpoint too, where you don't have a traditional script. You have it's a choose your own adventure in a way. So you don't have this kind of traditional narrative arc of your character. So at one point you're having a conversation, and you have multiple options, and you could be angry, happy, indifferent, all in the same conversation. And trying to link those together was kind of a challenge. So it was really fun from that standpoint.
How did you prepare for the role?
Oh.
How do you prepare for being a Blade Runner?
Taking psychedelics and
Whiskey?
and talking to Siri, maybe.
Right.
Siri and Alexa.
She's great.
Did that for about 12 hours.
Yeah, that's for the Apocalypse Now game.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed I wasn't invited for the Siri pie.
Yeah. Well, no, I didn't take psychedelics. Not for this role. No, I mean, I've just always been a huge fan of Blade Runner.
Right.
And also, I read a lot of detective fiction, and so noir and Blade Runner.
Hit us with a little bit of Detective Harper kind of.
Holly,
Yes, Detective Harper.
take us to Chinatown, Holly.
I'm sorry, Detective. I don't think I can do that right now.
Why not?
Are you listening? We're not able to go to Chinatown right now.
You're blowing my mind, Holly. Please do as you're told.
I'm sorry, Harper. I can't do that.
If you don't, I will replace you with Cortana.
Oh, boom. I have a very, very important
Don't
question.
make a girl cut you.
So this is a very, very important question for you, Tyler. So in a bar brawl between Deckard, Kay, and Harper, who do you think would come out on top?
In a bar brawl?
Yeah.
Holly.
Holly, for sure. He's gonna cut somebody. I think I'd say Harper, man. I gotta take Harper. But I also think what Harper probably has is, although you don't get to see Harper, I think that Harper's probably the best looking Blade Runner. That's how I was playing it.
Obviously.
So I think just charm.
I caught that.
Yeah, you did? Okay, good. I
Yeah.
did my job then. That was, yeah, I think I'd take Harper. Charm and, good looks, I think,
All the way.
would just, it would put them back on their toes. They wouldn't know how to deal with it.
Harrison Ford, Ryan Gosling, Harper.
I'm a big fan of multi-branching narrative and choose your own adventure, and I think that when done right, it has a lot of legs, right? So walk us through how environmental storytelling was a key component, Giz.
Sure. Yeah, so it's I'm not allowed to cuss. It's a cluster frack. It's kind of like the scene out of a Beautiful Mind, where we just literally cover every wall with every possible branch and walk through. Okay, well then if I do this, how does that happen, and what does that impact that? And it gets
Kind of like a
worse and worse.
butterfly effect, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It gets worse and worse the more decisions you make earlier on, because they have impact, and you have to keep track of characters that are still around and stuff, and how they react to you. And massive props to all of the MMOs and the RPGs that go out there, like Mass Effect and those games and these big MMOs and RPGs that explore the branching narrative, because they're tremendously hard to do. And especially when you're actually trying to tell a story, and the more player freedom you give, the less control you have over the story. So it's always about finding the balance between, especially with an IP that has certain themes, and it's about finding that balance between player freedom and controlling the narrative, and it's not easy.
And you have different endings. Oh, and obviously I won't spoil it, but there's different endings as well, depending on what you decide.
Yes, we do have different endings,
Right.
depending on how you decide to play Harper and the choices you make along the way.
How do you, there's certainly twists and turns along the way. How do you keep the script kind of streamlined?
We don't.
Yeah.
There are certain ways, and actually, it's a lot of testing. We find ways that we have a QA department that tries to break the game and mess with things, and then we write for contingencies and design for contingencies, and then sometimes we'll let the player branch and explore different areas, and then we'll funnel them back in to a main theme or a main crisis point,
Got it.
and then we'll kind of let them branch again.
Yeah, what I was just wondering is, are you going to do like a director's cut? Are you going to do different versions?
No.
I
just
wouldn't
said it
know
was really
where
hard,
you would
George.
start with that. I wouldn't know where you would start. Valerie, what can you say about Harper's Guide, Holly? What is she like?
Holly's interesting because I think Holly has her own agenda, but she definitely wants to be helpful. And I think what's interesting to find out about Holly is that originally she was going to be done in a different way.
Oh.
Our company, PCB, was working on a voice product where it's sort of a sampling of an actor speaking, and then it composes it into other words so it can build a whole vocabulary, so actors can license their own voice to work on projects, but not have to actually work on the project. It's very interesting. But it didn't end up being ready and fully envisioned by the time we needed it to be done for this game. So at that point, we sent out, PCB sent out auditions for Holly. My husband was actually the vocal director on the game, and we didn't want it to be nepotistic, so I submitted my audition through the agency, and I don't even know if I put my last name on it or not, because we didn't want to.
Oh no, one of those.
We didn't want to influence the casting on it at all. But I'm sort of known for what we call the Val 2000, which is my signature voiceover style, and I've done a lot of narrators, like for Ridge Racer, that type of stuff. Ridge Racer and all types of games.
You're the Ridge Racer?
Ridge Racer,
Yeah.
I was the voice of Ridge Racer. Yeah, I was the female voice in Ridge Racer.
I'm getting your autograph after this.
And all kinds of other games. You know, I was for NovaLogic. I did all their in-flight, their flight sims. I was the voice on all of those for a long time. So the Val 2000 is sort of my known go-to. So we were like, well, this is sort of awesome. And when they heard what I was doing on the speech sampling, it was like, that could actually work. So it was very interesting. We were trying really hard not to keep it nepotistic, but I ended up being on the project at the end of it all, after going through the auditions with the agencies and everything else. And then, so Trevor's not here, but they ended up selecting me, which was awesome. So I got to work with my husband, which is always a bonus. And then I got to be Holly. And I think Holly's just really cool because she's guiding you through the entire process of the game. And small spoiler, she does have her own agenda, but I don't think in playing it, you're very aware that she has her own agenda until it takes that turn.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because she's guiding you, and I think sometimes you don't realize that she's guiding you to a certain point. You think that she's just sort of helping you. So she was a really interesting character to play because she was an AI, but she definitely sort of had her own underlying agenda, as opposed to just being the helpful, non-personality type of.
You play robots very well.
Yes. Starboard engines damaged. Imminent destruction.
I wouldn't want to
Fine.
meet you in a dark alley.
I was also the voice of Epiphany in the game as well, so I had two characters. So I got to have one
great.
sort of crazy cuckoo off the charts character as well. She was a lot of fun.
And what was the VO production process on this project, but maybe versus some of the other ones that you've done in the past? Is there anything different?
It was interesting because we had cast the main cast, and originally Harper wasn't going to be one of the characters. So we had gotten pretty much through most of the process, and then went back and added in Harper, and then of course that affected Holly's lines, and had to go back and record all of those because we had to fill in a lot of space of her talking to him. So Holly, which had started off as a very small part, ended up being, I think, the most amount of dialogue in the entire game. So
And
I was in a booth by myself for
It is a
very
pretty
long time.
isolated process. So it's not like you guys are in the same room. Is it you record your lines and then?
No, we have to, it's part of being a voice actor, everyone says, oh, you're not a real actor, you're a voice actor. And it's like, oh, I have to act in a room, we have to act in a room by ourselves. So you really have to think about, what am I reacting to? Who am I talking to? And you're having to add all those in. And it's like, I can't be brooding on a microphone. You don't hear that.
Yeah.
So I have, if I'm going to raise my eyebrow, you have to hear that in my voice. I can't rely on any of my physicality to give you that performance. So you have to all do it vocally, and it's actually much harder, I think, than on-camera work. It's much more freeing than on-camera work because we're not limited by our physicality. So you're not limited by what you look like anymore. It's just what you sound like.
Yeah.
But it's hard because we're having to react to things that aren't actually happening in front of us. We're having to do it all here.
Yeah, and a lot of times you don't have you don't get to hear what the other character is saying either. You just have your script, and so you rely on the director, and you create a relationship where, you create your character, you can plug it into these lines, but a lot of times you don't get to hear the emotion that's in the other character's voice, and so sometimes, you're acting blind sometimes, and hopefully it lines up. A lot of, and it does.
Right. Well, that's why
It's one of those things that always lines up. It's great. But it's an interesting process because you don't get to react off another character.
Right, so we really do rely a lot on our directors. Anytime you listen to a video game and you're listening to the voiceover, or any sort of animation, anything where you're listening to a voiceover, it's really not just about the voiceover actor, because it's really the team that's working together, the person who's writing your script, but very much so the director, because the director's helming your ship. They're making sure everyone's doing their jobs and all those things fit together and it's all headed the right direction. But a director may record one actor a year before they record the next actor who's talking to them, and it's up to them to remember, okay, in this scene, you know what, I know they're mad, but they didn't actually escalate there. They brought it down and got real quiet and brooding. So you, as the second actor, can't escalate because we're gonna be off kilter. I need you to react to him being brooding as opposed to what you think he would be doing. So the director's job is really to keep, and I think Keith did a great job of this on this project, is keeping everybody at the same level and remembering what everybody did before everyone else. And it can be a very long process. And they have to really keep all of that organized and focused and know where everything's going.
And it's also very fun because you can wear your pajamas. You don't have to look good in the
It's
booth.
always casual Friday in the booth.
I hardly ever wear pants in the booth.
We have to talk about
That was awkward.
That was very awkward.
And you guys must have done an amazing job because we don't see either of you in the game.
We're just the disembodied voices.
Yeah, totally.
Let me take it to a more macro level. So, you know, artificial intelligence has infiltrated mainstream pop culture with TV shows like Person of Interest, Westworld, games like Detroit Become Human. How do you think entertainment is exploring AI, and how do you feel about the stories being told about AI right now? Google.
It's happening right now.
You guys are gonna
My kids love playing games with OK Google. Okay, I don't know if any of you have played these. There's like Disney has a line of games, Cars, Mickey Mouse, that sort of thing. And my kids will play the game again and again and again, just exploring the different branching narrative, just revisiting the story, trying new things, and they just love it. And so they're getting super comfortable with that, right? They're getting comfortable with interacting with this experience with the, you know, the little Cylon sitting on the table. And so I think that the foundation is being laid right now, and there's a comfort with it, and I think that there'll be more gameplay like that, right? Like all games have, or most games have some bit of AI, whether it's pathfinding or NPCs, but I think that we'll find more and more games where you can't tell the difference between an AI and a player, right? Where I might be in a social VR game playing, you know, immersed in a universe, and I'm interacting with folks that maybe this is a completely independent player, maybe this is actually someone who's paid to perform in the game as an NPC, or maybe this is AI, and so those lines will get blurry, where you know, it's all just in the service of telling this story and creating this universe.
Do we feel that Hollywood has it correct in terms of what AI can and can't do?
Never, you know, like it's all just kind of this distant point that you're working towards. But the thing that's interesting to me is how all this is converging right in front of us, right? Like what used to be distant future and then near future is now. And I'm interested to see how entertainment adapts. And I think that entertainment is definitely, the business incentive is there to adapt, and they want to figure it out. But it's kind of challenging because if you grew up telling a linear narrative where you're like, okay, this is where the camera goes, this is the story I'm telling, I dictate this, it's a pretty big change to make where you're giving up that control. And now I'm just like making a sandbox that the player is going to play with, and they're going to do what they want to do. I've seen a lot of folks that just struggle with it, and they can't get over it. So I think that's where game developers have a unique advantage, because, you know, game developers came up with that understanding. Like the player is in control, the player has agency, and so they're more comfortable in giving that flexibility and giving up that control in the service of creating like a more personal and unique experience.
And George and Giz, from a story perspective, do you feel like some of the stories around AI right now is kind of like the direction that you guys want to explore more in, extend?
You know, like what I think is so strange about this is how much now I think there's AI in games that I think people don't even realize. Like I think when you're playing games online, a lot of times now, especially maybe in mobile space, like the people you're playing with aren't always really people. You know what I mean? And I don't think people are as aware of that as they know. So to me, that's kind of the thing where it's like kind of like, oh, that's like her. It's kind of creepy, you know? But I think it is going to be something that's going to let us do much more amazing games than what we do now, because we're going to have, it's just sort of like there was this thing where physics allowed us, when physics started to get realistic in games, it opened up all these kinds of gameplay, even just like something dumb like Angry Birds, that just made it more interesting because all these things could happen. AI is going to make games where all these things are going to emerge that no one planned for, that are going to be really amazing, and people are going to stream it, and they say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I got someone. It's like my kid with Alexa. Like, I can't believe I got Alexa to say this. I can't believe whatever. Like, people are going to do that in games, and it's going to be things no one expects, and it's going to surprise them. It's going to be really cool.
I'm still waiting, so my daughter gets very upset at Alexa, and I'm still waiting for Alexa to snap back at her in like a tone. She's like, Alexa, please play the Hamilton soundtrack. And she's like, and Alexa's just always so cool, and it's like, I cannot find the Hamilton soundtrack. And I'm just waiting for Alexa to come back and be like, I will not play the Hamilton soundtrack.
Don't make me cut it, girl.
Here you go.
It's like that. Have you guys seen that SNL skit of the Amazon Echo? It was so cool. What about the types of stories that are being told from a fiction perspective? You know, is Skynet looming? Is AI and the future of AI that much doom and gloom, or is there a more hopeful note that you want to kind of see explored in Hollywood films and games?
I mean, I think at this point we've explored the gamut of the good AI and the bad AI. I think what's really interesting is what these guys were talking about too, is the building off of the personalities.
Right.
And I think that the personalities, I mean, I've always had a personal attachment to the characters and the AI that I play in my games and my allies, and I get really emotionally attached to them. And the stories that they are, but the more complex they get and the more that they start responding to player interaction, and also the more persistent they become, the more that you live with these characters playing these games and these long games for like days and then months and then years, I think it's going to be really hard for people to detach their real emotions that they feel and the relationships with people versus the relationships they have with AI, with a specific AI. And I think that's where and again, these stories like 2049 and her and
Yes, I think Spike Jonze did a great job with
I think those are where I think they're more interesting stories to tell about, like what it means to be human and what it means to feel, and where the line is between human emotions and created emotions, rather than the Skynet just eventually blowing us all up.
Or the Velt.
I say AI, take the wheel.
Well, they literally will be taking the wheel very soon.
Yeah.
I'm scared of that.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up with a final question. I'll target this to George and Alcon. What is the future of Blade Runner? Well, we're going to love to hear something about another film, but what can you share in terms of what's next?
Well, we, I think, just announced our partnership with Titan Publishing to do a comic book series, which we're very excited about. There's also a mobile game that's going to be coming out later this year that we're really, really excited about. And, you know, everything we do, we're going to do when we have everything set up to do a great version of it, because we love the franchise. But I can guarantee you that we will pursue Blade Runner in all forms and all media. And we have some really terrific things coming up for it.
All right, well, Comic-Con, you've been a blast to share our game with, and we really hope that you have a great time. Thank you so much for turning out again.
Thank you.